Hello everyone, my name is Kui. Today I would like to use how to use scope and closure in JavaScript. The closure and scope are two topics usually confuse so many web developers. A good understanding of the concept, it can help you to reduce the bug in your application, but also help you to increase your programming proficiency. Okay, now how many scope we have in JavaScript? We have three types of scope: block scope, function scope, and global scope. The block scope, the variable declared inside a pair of curly braces, cannot be accessed from the outside of the block. In the function scope, the variable declared inside the function cannot be accessed from the outside of the function. However, in global scope, variables declared in the variable scope are accessible from anywhere within the programming, including inside the function and the blocks. In order to understand how closure works, we need to understand and how the lexical scope works and what is lexical scope. A lexical scope defines how variable names are returned in the netted functions. The netted functions, in this case a child function, have access to the scope of their parent functions, and this often confused with closure, but lexical scope is only an important part of closure. What is closure? A closure is a function having access to the parent scope even after the parent function has closed. A closure is created when we define a function, not when a function executed. Now let's move on a practice session so you will understand how scope and closure work. Now let's define a variable and initialize the value is 1. We define the outer function. And inside the outer function, we declare b variable and initial value is 2. We define inner function. Inside the inner function, we declare c variable and initialize value is 3. Now we call inner function inside the outer function. Now let's test so you will understand how scope works. Let's try to output a variable to the console. You can see a can be output to the console. It is because console.log and a in the same scope. In this case it's global scope. Now let's try to access c variable inside the inner function. You see the error. C is not defined. It is because C is a function scope. The variable inside the function scope cannot be accessed from the outside of the function. So in this case it's called error. I'm going to put those function in common. Now inside the inner function, let's try to output A, B, and C. A, B, and C. And we call outer function. We can see A, B, and C can be output to the console. Let me explain. C and console.log in the same scope, so C can be accessed and it's gonna show in the console. B variable outside the inner function. The variable outside of the function can be accessed from inside of the function, so B show in the console. In a similar way, A variable outside the inner function and it can be accessed from inside of the function, so A also show in the console. Let's move to another sample so you will understand how closure works. Let's define the outer function. Inside the outer function, I will declare the counter variable and initialize the value is 0. I will define inner function. Inside the inner function, I will increase the counter variable by 1. Now I will output the counter to the console. Inside the outer function, I will call the inner function. Now let's call the outer function. We see the value output is 1. It's because when we call the outer function, it's gonna capture the outer scope, outer function scope. In this case, counter variable is 0 and the counter increased by 1 and show in console. So we see the value is 1. Let's try to call the outer function one more time. You see the value is still 0. It is because when we call the outer function on the second call, it will repeat the same outer scope. The variable is still 0 and it's gonna increase by 1. So the output is 1. This is not our expectation. We want the value is 2. So how can we fix this? In the outer function, instead call the inner function, we return this function. Let me put those in common. Now I will declare the counter1 variable and assign it to outer function. Now I call counter1 function. The value is 1. I try one more time. The value now is 2. You can see the outer function has been finished executing, but the counter value is still increasing. In the first call, the output is 1. On the second call, the counter variable is stored in the memory, so it increased by 1. 1 increased by 1 is so 2. And this is how closure works. In order to make sure you understand how closure works, I'm gonna move on another sample. Now let's define a parent function and put the argument user. In the parent function, I gotta declare the radius variable and initialize the value is 3. I will output to the console the number of credits of that user users. Hey, initial Reddit value Reddit. Now I will return an anonymous function. Inside an anonymous function, I reduce the radius by 1. Now I will check the number of credits of that user. If the number of credits greater than 0, I will output to the console the number of credits of that user remaining. Greater than 0. Output users has credits remaining. Now I will check the number of credits. If the number of credits is lesser or equal 0, I will output that say user has not enough credit. If credits lesser or equal 0, output to the console users has not enough credits. Now let's declare a Mary variable and assign it to the parent function Mary user and assign to parent function with initial value Mary. When we call this, we can see Mary has initial rated value is 3. It is because it captures the parent's function scope with initial rated is 3. It's gonna output to the console Mary has initial rated value is 3. Let's call Mary function one time. You can see Mary has 2 credits remaining. It is because in this call the red number will reduce by 1, so the rate is 2 greater than 0, so it's gonna output to the console Mary has 2 credits remaining. Let's try to call Mary function one more time, and let's try one more times. We can see Mary has not enough credit. In this case the Mary credit is 0, so it's output to the console Mary has not enough credits. Let's try to declare another user and to assign that user to the parent function. Now we declare John user and assign to parent function initial value John. Save it. We can see John has initial value is 3. Now John work in the same way. It will capture the parent's function scope with initialized value rated is 3. If we call John one more time, you can see John has 2 rates remaining. So this is how closure works. The rate variable in this case is right number, and it can be accessed from inside of an input function. Moreover, it also stored in the memory. For each define when we define the Mary and John, we're gonna capture the parent function scope and make a separate rated value in its memory. So we can see Mary has not enough credit. However, John still have 2 credits remaining. Hopefully you understand how closure works. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.